Ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
We have taken tremendous steps.
We choose to go to the moon before this decade is out.
We have achieved the earth-shaking, the breathtaking, the groundbreaking,
One small step for man.
and left a mark in the heavens. Our successes build one upon another and amplify what is possible. It's time we take the next great leap. We're building the next chapter of American exploration, returning to the moon to stay, so we can go beyond to Mars, to expand what's possible and further our understanding. The architecture for these missions is already taking shape. We will go with new systems, bold designs, and a sustainable mission. You can hear it, taste it, touch it. We are going. We are training, testing, pressing our pioneering spirit into every component, defining our resolve with every line of code, and securing our success with every welcomed partnership. This is not hypothetical. This is not about flags and footprints. This is about sustainable science and feeding forward the advance of the human spirit. Because we are the pioneers, the star sailers, the thinkers, the visionaries, the doers. And because we stand on the shoulders of giants to go farther than humanity has ever been, we will add our names to the rolls of the greatest adventurers in history. Every day, every mission, we advance this calling. We are NASA. And after 60 years, we're just getting started.
After traveling through space for more than 6 months and crossing 300 million miles, InSight has reached its destination, the red planet Mars. Welcome to Mission Control at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'm Hill. Less than an hour from now, InSight will begin the most harrowing 6.5 minutes of the entire mission, EDL, Entry, Descent, and Landing. The team is as prepared as it can be, but who knows what Mars has in store today. The crew's mission support area is filled with engineers monitoring the situation, and for the first time during a Mars landing, you can be in the room too. We have a 360-degree camera in this control room, allowing you to experience the landing right along with the team. There you see it. And to look up the link, just go to the InSight watch page you see there on the screen. And this mission has actually 2 control rooms. The second is at Lockheed Martin Space outside of Denver, Colorado. Engineers there are on Console 2. Plus, people all over the world are tuning in at museums and libraries and other locations, including this one at the Pasadena Convention Center, and that is where friends and family are watching right now. There will also be an opportunity to watch in New York City. There they are cheering. There will be also an opportunity to watch in New York City when landing coverage gets displayed on the NASDAQ Tower you see there in Times Square. And of course, if you are watching, please snap a picture and share it with us using the hashtag Mars Landing. We'd love to see it. Now I'd like to introduce you to NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. Thank you for coming.
Oh, it's my honor. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you here.
Great to be here.
So this is your first Mars landing.
It is. In this job. Now, I have witnessed these as, I should say, from the sidelines for many years. This is going to be the 8th time that we have a successful landing on Mars. Everybody knock on wood.
That's right.
But this is the first time for me to participate as the administrator, so it's very exciting.
Nervous?
Very much. Not nervous.
Not
excited.
Nervous.
Look at the amazing people here.
Yeah.
There's no way I could be nervous.
All right. So we hope to have you back on set after landing and maybe take a couple of social media questions.
Absolutely.
All right. If you would like to ask the administrator a question, use the hashtag AskNASA. And before you go, you did ask about the Lucky Peanuts.
Yes.
So this is your bottle to take in there.
Happily munching on these.
All right. Thanks for joining
Thank
us. Now let's give you some background. InSight, in short, is short for interior exploration using seismic investigations, geodesy, and heat transport. It's different from other Mars missions, which all studied the surface. InSight is the first mission to study the interior of the red planet.
The basic idea of InSight is to map out the deep structure of Mars. We know a lot about the surface of Mars, we know a lot about its atmosphere, and even about its ionosphere, but we don't know very much about what goes on a mile below the surface, much less 2,000 miles below the surface down to the center. And this will be the first mission that's going to Mars specifically to investigate the deep inside of Mars.
We know that the Earth is habitable. We know that Mars is not. There might be something that we find out in terms of the structure of Mars versus the structure of Earth that maybe can help us understand why that is.
InSight carries a seismometer which measures the seismic waves that have traveled through Mars from Mars quakes and maps out the deep interior structure of Mars.
We're going to also have a heat flow and physical properties probe, which will penetrate into the Mars surface about 5 meters or 16 feet to take the temperature of Mars.
And it has a radio science experiment which uses the radio on the spacecraft to measure small variations in the wobble of Mars's pole to understand more about the structure and composition of the core.
InSight will be the first mission to pick instruments up off the deck of the lander and place them on the surface of Mars. I like to say that we're playing the claw game on Mars with no joystick. The seismometer needs to be installed in one place and basically not move in order to get the best seismic data.
We also have a wind and thermal shield that will then be placed on top of that seismometer to protect it further from the environment.
For the heat flow probe, HP cubed, it also needs to sit in one place, take a while to hammer itself down into the ground and acquire the thermal measurements over a long period of time.
InSight is a mission to Mars, but it's much, much more than a Mars mission. In some sense, it's like a time machine. It's measuring the structure of Mars that was put in place 4.5 billion years ago, so we can go back and understand the processes that formed Mars just shortly after it was accreted from the solar nebula. By studying Mars, we'll be able to learn more about Earth, Venus, Mercury, even the Moon, even exoplanets around other stars.
Landing on Mars is always difficult. More than half the missions have failed. Our experts in this field are systems engineers for entry, descent, and landing. They speak EDL. Let me introduce you to two in our control room, Christine Soleil, who will be making the mission callouts during landing, and Julie Wirtz-Chen. She is our color commentator who will help explain mission operations. Christine, let's start with you. I understand that there was a final software update and adjustment. What does that mean?
That's right. Yesterday we sent the last EDL software parameter update to the spacecraft's computer. This update told the spacecraft exactly when it will hit the top of the atmosphere and also fine-tuned things like when to deploy the parachute. This EDL software is very important because InSight uses this software to perform entry, descent, and landing completely on its own. Mars is so far away from Earth that when a command is sent from Earth, it takes about 8 minutes for it to reach the spacecraft. Entry, descent, and landing from start to finish is less than 8 minutes long. So InSight has to do this all by itself.
All right. Its fate is sealed. Now, I understand that the team is about to do a readiness poll. Julie, can you fill us in on that?
Sure. So that's going to be a poll between our EDL communications engineer and several of the different orbiters and antennas that we have here on Earth. So we have Marco listening in on us, and MRO, which is Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, will be listening to our data and recording it for us. And then the radio science engineers will be eavesdropping in on our signal from all the way back here on Earth. And Sandy, our EDL communications engineer, will be checking in with them, making sure that they're all ready to go, ready to support us in just a little, under an hour to land on Mars.
All right, so we're standing by for that
Yep.
readiness poll. And I understand that the peanuts are going to be passed in there pretty soon?
I believe that's the idea. Yeah, we'll be passing around the peanuts very soon after that. For those of you who don't know, the JPL peanuts are a tradition that gives us a little bit of extra luck on our critical events. So if anybody out there wants to join in on peanuts and give us some extra good luck peanut vibe, we'd love to have it.
Well, there's a story behind that way back when in the early days of JPL, there were several missions, and there were 6 Ranger missions to the moon that failed.
Yep.
But then with Ranger 7, somebody passed around peanuts.
Yeah, and it worked, and you don't mess with what works. So
Absolutely.
It's not a superstition, it's a tradition.
All right.
We just give ourselves that little bit of extra luck.
All right. So if you have peanuts at home, please have some.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. Join
Thanks,
us.
Julie.
Thanks.
NASA has had 7 successful Mars landings, but the EDL team never ever becomes overconfident. JPL Chief Engineer Rob Manning says things have to work just right during 6.5 critical minutes.
Although we've done it before, landing on Mars is hard. And this mission is no different. The process to get from the top of the atmosphere of Mars to the surface, we call entry, descent, and landing, or EDL. It takes thousands of steps to go from the top of the atmosphere to the surface. And each one of them has to work perfectly to be a successful mission. The process starts well above the top of the atmosphere of Mars. The cruise stage faces the sun. It also has its radio antenna, which faces Earth. But now we don't need the cruise stage. Its job is done. The next step, just 7 minutes before arriving to the top of the Mars atmosphere, is to separate the cruise stage. Before you hit the top of the atmosphere, though, the space capsule has to orient itself so that the heat shield is precisely facing the atmosphere. Now the fun begins. The vehicle is moving at nearly 13,000 miles an hour, but it's hitting the top of the atmosphere at a very shallow angle, 12 degrees. Any steeper, the vehicle will hit the thicker part of the atmosphere and it will melt and burn up. Any shallower, the vehicle will bounce off the atmosphere of Mars. At the very top of the atmosphere, it's about 70 miles above the surface of Mars, and the air is starting to get thicker and thicker and thicker. As it does that, the temperature of that heat shield gets well over 1,000 degrees centigrade, enough to melt steel. Over the next 2 minutes, the vehicle decelerates at a backbreaking 12 Earth Gs, from 13,000 miles an hour to about 1,000 miles an hour. At about 10 miles above the surface of Mars, a supersonic parachute is launched out of the back of the vehicle. 15 seconds after the parachute inflates, it's time to get rid of the heat shield. 6 pyrotechnic devices fire simultaneously, allowing the heat shield to fall and tumble away from the vehicle, exposing the lander to the surface of Mars. 10 seconds after the heat shield is dropped, 3 pyrotechnically deployed legs are released and locked for landing. About a minute later, the landing radar is turned on, sending pulses toward the surface of Mars as the vehicle starts to try to measure how high it is above the surface and how fast it's going. At about a mile above the surface of Mars, the lander falls away from the back shell and lights its engines. And very quickly, the vehicle must rotate out of the way so that the parachute and the back shell doesn't come down to hit it. The last thing that has to happen is that on the moment of contact, the engines have to shut down immediately. If they don't, the vehicle will tip over. So if all the steps of entry, descent, and landing happen perfectly and we are safely on the surface of Mars, we'll be ready to do some exciting new science.
Later on in the program. Meantime, let me introduce you to someone who has been working on InSight for 7 years. He's the project manager, Tom Hoffman. 7 years, and today's the day.
That's right, 7 years, but we're just a little over 40 minutes now, and we're going to be on the surface. It's going to be awesome.
Really exciting
All
stuff.
worth it.
All right, so let's talk about InSight. It's using tried and true technology. It's based on Phoenix. This time, there's a bigger challenge with communication, correct? Normally, we have an orbiter that can give us bent pipe communications, but it's different this time.
That's right. Most of the time when we've landed recently, we've had Mars Odyssey, which can do bent pipe communications, and so we get real-time data as we go through EDL, and we've come to expect that, and actually we really want that. In this case, our primary technology, primary orbiter is Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And so what that's going to be doing is actually will be listening to us on the UHF. If you go to the video, you can see this. MRO will be listening to us and be getting all the primary data, and it will send it back to us, unfortunately, only at 3 hours after we land.
So it doesn't give us the bent pipe live information.
It doesn't. And we have a couple of other sources that we're looking at. We have a Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia, Max Planck Observatory in Effelsberg, Germany, which will be giving us UHF, but those only give us a couple of different points in time. And so we did something kind of cool this time. We brought along a couple of CubeSats called Marco. And so hopefully they're both working great today.
Oh, fantastic.
So we're hoping that they're going to continue to work all the way through EDL, and they will be giving us real-time feed. So we can show how that works on the next video here.
There they are.
So you can see here's InSight with its crude stage, getting close to Mars. But we have two stalkers following us. They've been following us since we launched. They launched on the same launch vehicle as us. And so you can see the green there is we're sending UHF signals to them, and then they turn that around and send a much stronger signal back to Earth. We can't communicate on UHF direct to Earth with a signal that tells what's going on in the spacecraft, but Marco can. If it works for us all the way down to the surface, we're going to have some great information coming from Marcos.
So Marco is basically trying to fill that gap that we would if we had live communication coming down to us.
Absolutely.
So if it does not work, does it affect InSight's mission at all?
No, not at all. We'll just be doing a little more nail biting, but right now it looks like it's gonna be working. But it doesn't impact InSight at all. And we have one final way that we're going to know that we've got successfully to the ground, which is the spacecraft will phone home.
Okay.
Once it gets down to the ground, it'll have gone 7 months through cruise, half minutes of terror, and it's going to call back and say, hey, I'm on the surface, I'm feeling pretty good, everything looks good so far.
And also to prep the audience, they're not, even after landing, we're not out of the woods just yet, correct?
Not just yet. We have one more step that we have to do. We have to let the dust settle, quite literally. We're going to kick up a lot of dust when we land. We need to let that dust settle before we want to unfurl our solar rays. We're 100% solar powered, so it's very important that we get those out. Unfortunately, both MRO and Marco will be out of view by the time that we have those completely unfurled. And so we're going to have to wait 5.5 hours until Odyssey comes by and tells us that, yes, indeed, our solar rays are out. So we'll definitely have a celebration when we get successful landing, but we're going to have to temper that just a little bit and wait about 5.5 hours to know absolutely for sure we're in good shape.
So we have immediate knowledge if we have the Marcos. So just to run it through it once again, what's going to happen with EDL? We've got we have the video, the show. How exactly is this all going to play out in 6.5 minutes? And we can roll the video.
Okay. Yeah, so you can see here we're attached to the cruise stage. We drop that off, say thank you for the ride to Mars. It burns up in the atmosphere. You can see it gets very hot on our heat shield. We're getting up in some places maybe 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit as we go through this. We're on the heat shield for about 4 minutes. That dissipates about 90% of the energy that we need to dissipate before we get to the surface. Then we pop our parachute. We're going about 850 miles an hour when we pop the parachute. We're on that for about 2 minutes. Then we'll drop off the heat shield. We'll start acquiring the ground with our radar, very much like an F-16 fighter jet radar. The legs will pop out. We'll start descending. We drop for just a second, which is very terrifying for me. Our descent thrusters, we have 12 of them. They're 68-pound thrusters. Start thrusting and dropping us to the ground. And slowly, slowly, we drop down, going only 5 miles an hour. So in that 6.5 minutes of terror, which is a little less than the 7 minutes, so that's great for me. We go from 12,300 miles an hour at 75 miles above the surface of Mars. We get to the surface, we're at 5.5 miles an hour.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Well, before you go, Tom, there was a couple of pictures we wanted to show you. We have watch parties taking place all over the country, and let's see if we can put one of these watch parties up for you to see. This is from Ohio. This is a person who has a watch party. It looks like in a classroom.
That is so awesome.
Isn't that great that folks are watching with us?
Yeah, I know people all across the globe are watching this, and we really want to put on a good show for them today.
All right. Well, I'll let you back in the room.
All right, I got to get back in there.
No, you're excited. All right, take care. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's introduce you to the people who built InSight, Lockheed Martin Space outside of Denver. These are the folks who built Viking in 1976 and Mars Phoenix in 2008. The operations team is there, and Lockheed InSight EDL manager Tim Lynn is standing by. Tim, what's going on in there?
Team's getting really excited. We're just about ready. We're, about a half an hour from entry and the start of entry, descent, and landing. So the team is really excited, focused, but also very excited about the upcoming successful entry, descent, and landing we're getting close to.
Well, we talked about the fact that InSight is based on tried and true technology. It's based on Phoenix, but you've had to make a couple of changes for InSight. What were they?
Yeah, we've so obviously, as you said, we leveraged Phoenix a lot. There was a lot of great things that we're able to take from the Phoenix mission, but InSight is a unique mission. It's landing towards the equator of Mars, and a number of things are different. Where we're landing, we're about 1.5 kilometers higher in altitude. In addition, and so what that's required us to do is actually come in a little bit more shallow. In addition, we're a little bit heavier than Phoenix was, so we've had to increase some of the strength of some of the lander itself. So the parachute, we had to increase the strength. We actually deploy the parachute a little bit higher because of some of the differences in our entry timeline, and because of when we're landing towards the end of dust season. So we also have actually increase the thickness of the heat shield. So we're about 1/4 inch thicker on our heat shield to accommodate that potential sandblasting that we could see when we actually do our entry, descent, landing. So a number of things we've changed, but we've obviously leveraged a lot from the very successful Phoenix mission as well.
That's fantastic. So you were able to kind of customize it, because there were some concerns earlier on that there was a dust storm taking place. It was dust storm season.
That's right. In fact, we've had a lot of great support from our orbiting assets, MRO and Odyssey, a couple of spacecraft that we've partnered with JPL and that were built here at Lockheed Martin. They've actually provided a lot of great insight into the weather on Mars, any dust storms that are potentially happening on Mars. And as of today, and actually the last couple of weeks, it's been great on the surface of Mars. We're anticipating a very nominal, very seasonal weather in terms of both the atmosphere as well as temperature, and dust storms appear to be very benign, so we're very optimistic it's going to be a great day for landing on the surface of Mars.
All right. That's great news. Thanks, Tim, and I know your team is getting excited over there just as much as we are. Take care.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay.
The time now is 11:21. It's about 20 minutes. The tension is building in both control rooms. It's about 20 minutes before stage separation. It's not too far off. Cruise stage separation is expected at about 40 minutes past the hour, so we are indeed getting close. So where is InSight going to Mars? It's a place called Elysium Planitia. Planitia is Latin for flat. Elysium is ancient Greek for afterlife paradise. It's located near the equator, north of Gale Crater, not too far from Curiosity rover. The team calls it the biggest parking lot on Mars. It's a place that's safe, got plenty of sunshine that will power solar instruments to study the interior of Mars.
What's inside Mars? We know a lot about what's inside Earth. But at Mars, we've only just scratched the surface. To learn how Mars formed, we have to study its deep interior. NASA's InSight lander was designed to do just that. By taking the planet's vital signs, listening for its pulse or seismic activity, including any Marsquakes, taking its temperature to see how much heat is flowing out from deep inside, and checking its reflexes to see how much the planet wobble whips around the sun. These all provide clues to what the planet is really like inside. So what's inside Mars? InSight can help us find out by giving Mars its first thorough checkup since it formed 4.5 billion years ago. The more we learn, the better we'll understand all the rocky planets and the history of our solar system.
Joining us now is Bruce Bennard, the principal investigator of Mars InSight. InSight is a mission to Mars, but we keep hearing again and again, it's more than a mission to Mars.
That's right, Gay. I mean, we're going to Mars, obviously, to study the Martian interior and to talk about the divisions inside Mars. But we want to use that information to understand more about the solar system as a whole and how rocky planets form.
And rocky planets, we have an image to show folks. So we're talking about Earth, the Moon, Mars.
Mercury, Venus, yes, the planets of the inner solar system that are made mostly of rocks. And they all share the same basic structure with a dense iron core, a rocky mantle, and then a crust of lighter silicate rocks. But the very details of the thicknesses of those layers, the sizes, and the compositions give us a lot of clues as to how those planets form and why they went down very different paths into the different planets we see today.
So explain to me, we are going to have a lander, you're going to be on the surface. How will you be able to study the interior?
Well, we use what are called geophysical instruments. They use the principles of physics to actually see through the rocks. I mean, we're using seismic waves. It's the same way you might use a flash bulb to take pictures of something. We're using Marsquakes, which send out vibrational waves through the planet, and as they go through the planet, they reflect off boundaries, they get bent, they change their velocity, and it changes the wiggles that you see on a seismogram. When we go through the planet, you can see that here it hits the various boundaries and those waves are reflected, sometimes they're bent. It becomes a pretty complicated pattern, but scientifically we've learned over the last 100 years how to interpret the code of the signal as it comes back up to the surface, and the seismometers pick up that signal and then turn it into data that we can use on Earth to understand, what the 3D structure of the planet.
So normally you use 3 seismometers. In this case, you're bringing SEIS. That's 1. How are you going to be able to get that information using 1?
Well, we had to get kind of clever because on the Earth, usually you have plenty of seismometers. You can use multiple seismometers to triangulate in on where the earthquake is. On Mars, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to use not only the P and the S waves that you may have heard about, but we're using the surface waves. And here you can see the surface waves kind kind of moving out from Marsquake, and as it passes over the InSight lander, you can see the seismogram up there in the upper left-hand corner where you have the wiggles. Now, those keep on going around the planet, and because Mars is not so large, they still have a fair amount of amplitude. They're completely damped out by the time it's gone all the way around the planet, passes over the spacecraft again, and finally, even the wave that went the other way around the planet comes across and hits us yet a third time. And so we have extra information over just the P and the S wave. We have these surface wave arrivals that we can use to pinpoint the distance from the Marsquake to our lander, and then we use something called polarization analysis to figure out which direction the waves are coming from. And by doing that, we can do the same thing that we can do with 3 stations on the Earth, just using the P and the S waves.
And very quickly, there is still another instrument built by DLR that's also being carried up by InSight. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's our heat flow probe, and it's a pretty cool instrument that uses a mechanical mole, we call it, to burrow its way down into the surface. It has a motor with that winds up a hammer, and it knocks itself down just a few millimeters at a time. But we do that 20 or 30,000 hammer strokes, and it gets us down. We hope to get down to be about 16 feet below the surface. And once we get down there, we're actually measuring the heat coming out of the planet by measuring the temperature along the cable as it comes up to the surface, and looking at how that temperature increases as we go down, and extrapolate that deep into the planet to understand how much energy there is inside the planet to drive the geology and to drive volcanism, Marsquakes, all kinds of activity.
It's amazing how much you'll be able to learn about the interior.
That's right. I think it is amazing. It's been something that I've been working on for my whole professional career, and it's just, I find it fascinating. But
all right, we'll talk about that. Thanks, Bruce. Who's first thought of a mission like this, as he mentions, 40 years ago when he was a graduate student. The rest of the team hasn't waited quite that long, but this is a big moment for them too. Recently, we sat down with a few of the members and asked them, what is it going to be like as we get close to landing?
It's a very difficult thing to do, and everything has to go perfectly. As humans, we've sent 17 different missions to the surface of Mars, and 10 of them have crashed. Before we can land on Mars, we have to get to Mars. How do we get to Mars?
The main responsibility of the navigation team is to ensure that the spacecraft is delivered to the right point at the top of the Martian atmosphere. The target location is about 12 kilometers in size. Our accuracy is comparable to shooting a basketball from Staples Center in downtown LA and hitting nothing but net in a basketball hoop in New York City that is moving at a speed of about 2 feet per second and is spinning about its axis.
The landing site, we have an ellipse that's pretty big. It's about 60 miles long. We could land anywhere in that ellipse. There's a chance that we could land right on a rock, and we don't really have any control over that, so that's what makes me nervous.
We've tested the radar by flying it on a helicopter. We've tested pieces of the heat shield by putting them in an ArcJet facility.
The NAV2 software will propagate from here on out, and we'll use velocity and acceleration. So we have powered off our star tracker, and we're on our NAV2 software, and everything's looking great.
Okay. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
All right, the cruise stage separation is just about 4 minutes away, and Rob Manning joins us now. Rob is the chief engineer here at JPL and an absolute veteran of Mars landings. We're going to play a little video for you right now. You haven't seen it yet, but we'll roll it. Let's go ahead. This is
514 reports carrier lock at
that day, Rob. There you are. You were the phase lead. You were sitting up front.
Yeah. That's what I look like when it's successful.
Yes.
I hate to see what it would have been like if I wasn't successful.
But talk about that. What is EDL like? Why is it so hard?
Well, it's many years of work by many, many people who struggle to put all the pieces together, and particularly because we can't really test entry, descent, and landing on this planet. It's much more complicated. Mars has a lower atmosphere, thinner atmosphere, less. You just can't put the pieces. So imagine you had a big Broadway production, but you couldn't really do the show until all the audience shows up. So that's what it feels like. So you never really know if you've really done it right.
Well, we've done it 7 times. Can we say that, hey, piece of cake, we know what we're doing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we get better at it. There's no doubt. We've learned for both the successes and our own failures, including failures of other missions outside of this country. So those pieces come together in our mind's eye. We try to put what we learn together and just do the best we can. And if we don't succeed, we will learn because we are collecting data on the way down. If something bad happens today, we'll be able to take what we learned, even though we may fall on the ground after getting kicked off the horse. Get back up, brush ourselves off, figure out what we did wrong, and get back on the horse.
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty. Just very quickly, give us some possible scenarios of what could happen during EDL today, especially during communications.
Well, the great news about having communications, there's almost anything that go wrong. There's a very good chance we'll figure it out. But things like, the parachute has to go right. We know you don't open parachutes on Earth going Mach 1.5. 1.5 times the speed of sound. You just don't do that. You don't need to on this planet. But we have to, because if we waited any longer, we'd be on the ground. Very complicated radar system. It has to work from outer space all the way to the ground and look for the ground. What if it locked up on the heat shield? Well, we've tried to avoid that problem. We fixed that problem, we think, to prevent that from happening. But what if we got it wrong? Things like that could happen, and our vehicle could have things bad happen. But we've worked hard to prevent them.
So
at this time, we expect
we're getting
that
close. We're going to go to the
has
control room
started.
for cruise state separation, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you, MRO.
I need to take off common. Yeah, yes.
Inside systems, EDL
Go ahead.
On inside court. At this time, MRO will have loaded their electrosequences. Marco is expecting carrier lock at any time. Marco B is reported there in bent pipe. Still waiting on A.
Copy that. Thank you.
Radio Science report. UHF carrier detected.
EDLCOM, Marco Alpha is in bent pipe mode. Marco Bravo has locked on the carrier. Marco Alpha has also locked on carrier.
Systems Ace on inside chord. As expected, the DSN has LOS for inside X-band.
Copy that. Thank you. All station, insight system, insight core. DSN has lost the X-band signal from insight, indicated expected cruise stage separation. Standing by for UHF signal acquisition via Marco or Radio Science.
We are about 5 minutes from entry and have confirmation we've lost the X-band signal from InSight. This was expected because we have transitioned from the antenna on the cruise stage to the UHF antenna on board the craft. Ground, this confirms that InSight is transmitting UHF signals as expected. InSight telemetry through the Marco relay is not expected until about 2 minutes before entry.
So, Rob, that was exactly what we were hoping to hear, that those are
The vehicle
working.
has also performed the turn to entry maneuver. The vehicle is turning away from a sun-pointing attitude and oriented itself to enter the Martian atmosphere.
This is a big first step. Getting the cruise stage separated. It's now, after the vehicle turns itself to the right orientation, the cruise stage is now going to be get further and further away until it's about 3 or 4 football fields away, and will burn up in parallel as the vehicle enters Mars.
And Christine mentioned turn to entry. What does that mean?
Well, it's because the cruise stage has to be pushed off to one side, like this. The rest of the vehicle has to turn to face the atmosphere and to be dead nuts on as it hits the top of the atmosphere.
So this is taking all the heat coming into the atmosphere.
Exactly. It will be both provide a source of drag, but also thermal protection, because it gets over 1,500 degrees Celsius on the top of on this heat shield. Very, very hot. But on the inside of the heat shield, it may be only a fraction of a few degrees above room temperature. So it's a wonderful protective device to keep our lander safe.
All right, so the next thing we're standing by for is